On this 20th episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast, I talk about why I learn languages, and then I have a chat with Richard Simcott.
Welcome to the Actual Fluency Podcast, the podcast that gives you the tools and inspiration to learn languages faster and more efficiently. And now your host, Chris Broholm.
Today's episode is sponsored by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial by visiting audibletrial.com/fluency. Hello everyone, and welcome to the 21st Actual Fluency Podcast. And as you might have known, I omitted episode 13 for cultural reasons. So this is actually the 20th episode of the very podcast you're listening to right now. And in lieu of that kind of anniversary, I've decided to not only bring on an amazing guest, Mr. Richard Simcott, whom you're going to listen to in just a brief moment, but I'm also going to be just taking up a little bit of your time here in the introduction to talk about language learning on a very personal level. Because you see, when I started in the whole language learning community half a year ago, so it was actually 2 years prior to that I had sort of unofficially entered it. And the background for entering was I did not know what to do with my life. And you kind of drift around, you watch some YouTube clips, and I was always into languages, so it was natural for me to stumble upon these great people speaking in, 10 languages on YouTube or even more. I remember seeing Richard, Benny, and Luca, and many more, I'm sure, that I don't remember the names of, or people who might have, become sort of inactive in the community. And I came across this at a kind of a personal dark hole. I was in a very dark hole, and, we all have our bad times in life, I'm sure, and my life was definitely no exception. I had been suffering from what was probably depression. I was not sure where to go with my life. I'd been through, family divorce, parent dying, and a house fire as well. So there was lots of stuff going on that kind of makes you I guess it just touches you emotionally. And I never really got over any of that. So I was in this dark hole and just not really sure what to do, and I signed up for a generic university degree, English, a BA in English, probably the most generic one you can do, and I didn't really have any kind of, let's say, deep passion for English literature or culture, but I mean, I enjoy English literature and culture to a certain extent, don't get me wrong, but I was signed up to the education just to get an education, really, and I think that's a pretty poor way to look at it. And I considered the job of teaching, high school children as a kind of a backup plan in a sense. It's like, I'll find what I'm really passionate about, and if that fails, I will go teach high school kids with my BA in English, or, well, it has to be an MA in English, but, once you have the BA, I'm sure the MA is just 2 years of formality. It's the same kind of work you're doing anyway. But the point I want to make is that language learning for me has become kind of a light in a dark hour. Just not only doing the kind of work and, getting to know other languages, but meeting people in the community. I mean, I've met so many wonderful people just on Facebook, many of them. And I was blessed enough to go to the Berlin Polyglot Gathering to meet even more people. And it just kind of enforces to me what I'm trying to say here is that learning all these languages, it's not a gimmick, it's not a trick. It's not some kind of party trick that you can just whip up at a party. Oh yeah, I speak Russian, by the way. Of course that's nice. I mean, it's fun to see people's reactions. You do what? But that's not why I do it. And I'm sure that's not why most of the people in the community do it. We do it because let me speak for myself first. I do it because it's a way of life. And the person who showed me this was actually Benny Lewis. Benny was, traveling. I always wanted to travel. I could never really figure out how to travel. I didn't have any kind of job that sustained it. I didn't have an education that I could just bring with me. And I had lots of stuff. Not tons of stuff, but I had too much stuff to just kind of go and do it anyway. So when he was writing about traveling and staying for a place for 3 months, teaching English or whatever he was teaching at the time, it was sort of like, it wasn't just he wasn't just showing a career path or a kind of a way to exist or a way to live. He was showing, to me personally, a new way of life, which I was immediately attracted to. But as you know, when you see something new, it's exciting. Then you go to bed and next day you forgot about it or something. The idea is brewing in your head. For me, definitely, I always take a lot of brewing times every time I have a decision to make. I always need to think it over in my mind. So this whole journey for me is not about becoming a hyper polyglot for the sake of it. It's about the journey itself and the experience you obtain. I wouldn't be able to go to, I wouldn't have gone to the Polyglot Gathering in Berlin if my interest was solely based on, speaking a ton of languages. Of course, that's nice. You can never rule out the vanity factors. We are human beings. We have vanity, of course. So, and I'm sure those people who do speak 10 or more languages, of course, they're proud of it. And of course, they want to, show the world what they've done. But that's not the driving force behind it. And it should never be, because it's a pretty weak one. But for me, language learning and the introduction into the community has been a lifesaver. Well, I wouldn't call it a literal lifesaver, but it's definitely taking my life from being very unproductive, doing absolutely nothing with it, and that's a waste of life, isn't it? And now into producing not only this podcast to help other people who perhaps suffered as I did or am doing. I mean, we're all suffering to some extent, aren't we? But it's also about me developing into a grown-up. Growing up, I'm 26 years old, so by this time I probably should be a grown-up by now. But when you have these kind of periods of darkness in your life, the kind of growing up is second most important to, let's say, watching TV or playing video games or whatever. So that's all I wanted to say today. It's a very personal message, but this is basically just to thank you guys for listening to the podcast. And if you are a new listener to the podcast, I promise that every episode is not like this. This is the 20th episode, named episode 21, logically. But usually I just briefly introduce the topic and, then move on from there. I don't usually give these kind of long emotional introductions, but I want to thank you for listening through it. And the interview with Richard Simcott is coming up now, and the first question I'm asking him is what he thinks of the Berlin Polyglot Gathering, because that's where I recorded the interview. And as always with these on-location interviews, I must apologize up front for the audio quality. There's a bit of some noise here and there. There's some echo. The recording conditions weren't optimum, but I hope that you forgive me anyway and enjoy the wise words of Richard Simcott, and have a fantastic day, weekend, or whatever is going on in your life at the moment. Write me a comment if you enjoyed this episode, or any episode really. Send me an email. I always enjoy them. But most of all, thank you for being a listener, and I'll see you on the next one.
I've really enjoyed the community, and I've enjoyed being with people who take part in the online community in person. For me, that's the important thing.
Right.
The thing I particularly like about that is the interaction, the social interaction that we have. Practicing languages, of course, but more than that, learning from each other. Because I don't think that there's just one person we learn everything from. I think we all learn something from each other. And that experience and that sort of motivation from both sides really engenders a sense of wanting to continue, and really promotes the interest in language learning.
Right. And it also real almost, doesn't it? Right, because you're sitting behind the screen at home, it seems like you're typing on Facebook, and it is a person, of course, but once you see them in real life, you put a face to it.
Exactly.
That's when it becomes real, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's when it becomes real, and I think, I've been to conferences, obviously, like this one. I went to a conference in Palma, which wasn't the Polyglot community, but it was a great event, and that, I think, really from that, when I won the Mehrsprachig competition in for Goethe Institute, and I became the ambassador for multilingualism.
Right. Great honour.
Some people think I put the title on myself. I read somewhere recently, and they said that he calls himself this ambassador, but actually it was the point of the competition.
Right.
And I like the title because I hope that I can be that for people.
Yeah.
I certainly get a lot of nice feedback from people that take their own time to write to me to say that they felt motivated by a video or some things that I've done online.
Right.
And I really appreciate it when people do that, because it shows me that what I'm doing in my spare time is appreciated.
Right.
I think if it weren't appreciated at all and it just fell on deaf ears, I think that there possibly wouldn't be the motivation there for me to do it still. But the online community, really, I think it just grew and grew and grew. More and more people started making videos and showing that they had really good skills and good knowledge to share, and it made sense to then bring that together in a physical place.
Right. And I guess that happened last year with
Budapest. It was the first one.
Which you were hosting or arranging?
Yeah, I was the main organizer for that event and hosted the entire event.
And people said it was amazing but short. It's kind of the things I've heard. I wasn't there.
People wanted more days in Budapest, and I've got to be honest, I didn't know what to expect. It was the first time we were doing it. The initial response was very positive, but I was also conscious that people need to go to work, people have studies, and I thought a weekend's a good amount of time because people do these weekend trips.
Sure.
And Budapest is a great destination because there are lots of cheap flights from all across Europe. So it made sense. And then the Catalan, link there also seemed like a really good idea. You could have locals who know about her and her story. In fact, we had the one of the people that put together her book, translation of the book, and he talked about that. Well, he sort of introduced it and brought copies as well. And
very unique,
yeah. And then somebody talked about the Hungarian language. I think the Polyglot conference, which is slightly different to the Polyglot Gathering, is that we like to highlight the local language and culture, or languages and cultures too. So we highlighted the Hungarian language by having a lecture on the language itself. And then there were some locals that came along as well. I think here with the Polyglot Gathering, really it's more a gathering of the polyglot community.
Sure.
Yes, it's really nice that we're in Berlin.
Right.
The association's possibly not as strong to bring in an expert on the German language and talk about that. And I think that complements the other idea of the conference very well.
Sure.
And so when Judith approached me at the Polyglot conference about setting up a Polyglot Gathering over a longer period of time, which appealed to a lot more people too, just seemed like a really good idea. To have the two things in place.
Right. Yeah, and obviously you're looking forward to hosting one in Novi Sad as well.
Exactly. And so October, polyglotconference.com.
Yeah.
Go on there, register.
Get the plug in, of course. Of course, that's why you're here. But I wanted to ask you what kind of changes you're making compared to last year, and possibly you've learned something here as well that you might incorporate into Novi Sad.
Novi Sad is going to have a different feel to the last two, for this one and to Budapest, in that it's going to be done in cooperation with an official body in Serbia.
Right.
So the Cultural Centre of Novi Sad is really helping to host this event. It's going to be done in their official buildings. They're going to be, it's going to be a slightly higher, I'd say higher level of formality, actually, to the talks themselves. There's going to be the downtime, of course, people can get together outside of the event, but it's going to be slightly more formal, I guess, in that way, as you would expect a conference to be.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, the name of conference and the name of gathering, it shows the levels of formality there.
Right.
The first conference, because it was the first one of its kind, and I was pretty much organising it on my own with a local team in Budapest. Really, that had maybe less formality than we'll see in Novi Sad.
Right.
But I think both that event as well will also be extremely enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've heard so many people asking me, well, you're going to Novi Sad, and so it seems like a lot of people will be going, and looking forward to that. I guess breaking away from the conferences a little bit, we haven't quite seen so much stuff from you in the last period of time. How are you still keeping up with the kind of the community and I guess the learning as well while you're busy with, I presume, your daughter growing up and family life?
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, the key difference between me and many other people online is that I don't make any money from what I do online.
Sure.
I simply do it as a hobby, and I enjoy it. It's an enjoyable thing to do in my spare time. What I like to do is to engage the community, and I do that mostly via Facebook now. I have a blog, which I haven't updated for a couple of years, I guess, and that coincides with me starting university courses in Sweden online.
Oh yeah, is that Uppsala?
In Dalarna.
Oh, Dalarna, yes.
Yeah, so I work full time. I have a full time job. Need to put bread on the table for us to eat. And then also, in addition to that, I study quite a lot of credits a year, I guess.
Right.
And that is my passion. If I weren't writing about it, it'd be ridiculous to not be studying. This is what I do. So I study languages. That's my main passion.
Right.
And it's not my job to be writing, although I do enjoy it when I've got time.
Right.
As I say, the Facebook page is probably the one that I keep up to date most, and I write there every week at least. Most days, actually, I probably write something on there.
It's easy to stay in touch with the phone and wherever you are.
Yeah, and it fits in. It feeds into Twitter. Sometimes I'll tweet independently of the Facebook page. So this Facebook page, for anyone that doesn't know it, who's listening, is facebook.com/speaking fluently. And the Twitter account is linked from there, so anyone that wants to see it can.
Perfect. But I guess the fear that some people might have had by seeing your kind of activity levels online go down was that you were quitting this language studies. But you said once that would never happen. No.
I never quit language studies. I think that organising the conference last year took a toll on me, because if you think I had a full-time job, I have my studies, I organised a conference in Budapest, and then also I've got a family. As you say, I have a young daughter, and I help my daughter with her language learning and her schooling as well. So we do, I work through her homework with her, and that she needs to learn to read, and all of this takes additional time, which I gladly give. My rhythm is probably from about 6 a.m. in the morning, Central European time, right the way through to midnight, and I don't stop.
Right, that's a long day.
It's a long day. At the weekends, I take a bit of time out. So I don't work my job at the weekend, so I have a bit of time to study languages, maybe write a few posts on a Friday night or on a Saturday if I want to add something. And then I do the normal things that you do with your child. Sure. Take her out to play, take her out to clubs, so that she gets the opportunities in life that I think she deserves.
Yeah.
So
even more than that, I would say, because I listened to you talk on, well, it was a bit of an informal talk about a little bit of everything, but you described the way you taught languages to your daughter, and I feel like you're doing quite a bit more than other parents might do. So I found that really kind of inspiring for when I get to that point where I should bring up someone. It's a big responsibility, I feel like.
It's a huge responsibility. You basically, I see parenting in this way. I'm preparing an individual to go out into the world and to make a life for herself. So that's what I want to do. I want to make an individual who can stand on her own 2 feet.
Right. How do you avoid overdoing it? Because obviously you speak, nobody knows how many languages these days, but I mean, I guess it's more than 10 if you have to say basic fluency.
Very difficult to put a number on.
Of course, and I don't want you to either. It's just to illustrate that you could potentially teach her 10 plus languages. But how do you avoid not going overboard with it? Because I'm sure some parents might be quite fanatic.
The temptation could be there to do that. I think that you've got to question is, okay, whose life is this? It's not, your child is not an experiment.
Right.
And your child is not a utensil to use to live your own sort of maybe missed glory, or something that you dream of for yourself, or you think isn't some sort of ideal. I think that you've got to take into account this is a new person to the planet. They've got lots of things to learn, not just languages. Right. Languages, one, is very important, but they also have math skills that they need to develop. They also have social skills that they need to develop. They have to learn about how things work in the world. Right. Whether it's the sciences or history or geography or whatever. They've got lots and lots of things that they need to study to get to a basic level of understanding where they can function in society, and to be successful if they want to have a career. Right. So as I've got a duty to offer that to my daughter. In addition, I can give her a gift which I think is more valuable than any money I can give her, and that's the gift of language. So when it came to choosing which languages to speak, really French, English and Macedonian, just because I spoke them as Macedonian didn't speak as a child, but my wife and I spoke one or two of those languages ourselves as children, right. And they were important for us to carry on in the family. German and Spanish, because they're useful languages in Europe, and Spanish in the Americas, North and South America.
It's a big language.
It's a big language. And it made sense because it's not a hugely different structure, it's not a hugely different vocabulary, it just made sense.
Right.
What I don't do is I don't burden my child with making sure she's perfect or doing anything like that. How can I? She's 7 years old. I didn't speak Spanish when I was 7.
No.
I didn't speak German until I was 22. So, making her speak them like a native, which just seems ridiculous.
Of course.
For me, the important thing is if she speaks back in English or French or Macedonian, or if she speaks back in German or Spanish a little bit, I don't mind. And I explained, we sat down when she was, I think, 3 years old. Right. And she said, Daddy, why do you speak to me in these different languages? Why do you speak in Spanish or in German? Why don't you just use English or French? And I said, and explain to her, when you're a big girl, you'll see that there are lots of places you can go and people speak different languages. Right. And it's so that you have a choice to go to more places and to be able to speak to more people. Right. And it gives you more things to do. I guess I have to put in a child's way of thinking.
Of course, yeah.
And and that's why I do it. And I said, you can listen to me, and that's all the only thing I ask is for you to listen to me. That's all you have to do. If you want to speak back and try and speak the language, then I'm really happy, and I'll help you to speak it better if you want. But I don't expect anything else of it from this stage.
Right.
This stage.
It's not like an unreal pressure you're applying. It's
exactly.
Her kind of pace. And
I loved her reaction to that. She said, "Clever, Daddy."
It sounds like a very quiet 3-year-old.
It was very sweet, and it was really natural. And I mean, you go through stages with kids. They'll have stages where she's had a couple of stages where she's queried it a little bit, right. But I've not had anywhere near the issues that I've heard with other people raising multilingual children, right. Refusing to speak a language, for example. Right. She's never really done that, and she will try and she will repeat. If I say, okay, let's see if you can try and say that, and we'll try and have a game where we say, okay, how do you say this in a different language?
Right. Yeah, make it into a game. That sounds like a good way to raise a kid, I'd say.
And other things we do, if we meet families that speak another language, she'll learn a couple of words. I mean, again, I don't go mad and say, only speak to my daughter in this language, this new language, because there's no really sense in doing it, and the people who I'm talking to will think, what's going on about? Right. But recently we've got Italian friends in Skopje, and she hears a lot of Italian, and she's been listening to it now for a few months, and now when I'm speaking to the parents in Italian and their children there too, we can just speak in Italian to the three children together. Yeah. And my daughter goes off and she knows what they're saying, she knows what we're saying to them. So she started understanding, and I think that's because of the shared roots between Spanish, French. It's not a huge leap for her to start getting some Italian. It's a couple of words that I had to explain in the beginning when she started hearing it. She goes, "What's this? What does that mean?" Right. And I just said it, and now she just knows.
That's good, because that shows she's curious as well. Because if she wasn't enjoying it, she would probably just kind of shut out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as a small child, she went through the same thing with Portuguese. She heard Portuguese quite a lot with some friends, and she's also had experience of Hebrew and of Japanese, and just picked up a few words. Right. But again, I wouldn't force her to keep up with that. Although now, a few years later, she can still sing "Mary Had a Little Lamb" in Japanese, and she can still say a few things in Hebrew. Right. Which I think is really cute. Yeah. And she surprised me the other day in the car. She said something in Hebrew. She's not heard it for a year. Wow. So I was like, oh.
Yes, child brains are, I guess, even more impressive than any other brain.
Yeah, I mean, they forget a lot. Sure. But they're like us in a lot more ways than we care to admit. But sometimes they will surprise you.
Yeah. That's nice. I'd like to ask you, switch the topic a little bit to general language learning. There's all these blogs, all these videos, all this advice. And the question I had that I want to ask you is quite specific, is Do you think that we are getting better as, let's call it, a unit of people interested in learning languages? Do you think the whole philosophy and wisdom is getting better, or do you think that the way to learn languages, the original message that you kind of brought on, do you think that's just being kind of refined or kind of presented in a different wrapping, so to speak? Or do you think there is a trend of improvement?
Okay, the improvement's definitely in technology.
Right.
So there's an improvement in technology of what's possible.
Yeah.
Okay, and we've heard at the Polyglot Gathering of people's ideas of what they do and things that help them to learn languages more efficiently.
Right.
And I think there's definitely that. What I would say is, and what I think is really valuable, is that we're getting a lot more voices coming in with their methods and how they learn.
Right.
And there needs to be a wide gamut of ideas and methodologies. And that's because there's a wide gamut of personalities and individuals learning languages.
We're all unique.
Yeah, exactly. So there's not... I'd hesitate to say that we're getting better ways of learning languages. I think that a lot of methodologies already existed.
Yeah.
And many people out there are parroting things that work. Right. And work for them from what they've already seen.
Of course. Like assimilating their own message.
Exactly. I mean, many of these things, translating from one language to another and checking the text, it's been done for donkey's years.
Yeah.
And same with, accent formation. These are not new concepts. Right. None of us are presenting these fantastic new innovations, except for if it's technology to use. We're not reinventing the wheel. You can't. The things are already there. People have been using them for a long time. It's just that maybe some people may not have been aware of them. Right. And they're being brought to light in,
that's what I was thinking.
New packaging.
That's what I was thinking, because there's, when 6-7 years ago, there wasn't that much material on the internet about it, let alone technology and resources. And because I've started writing a blog and I see other people have started writing blogs, it's kind of like, it's not so much new things, it's just kind of maybe a new perspective, if anything.
Yeah, it's an individual perspective on things, and maybe chopping and changing things, adding things in, taking things away that worked. And they're showing that you can combine different ways of learning to be effective. Although that way of being effective may not suit everyone. Right. The next person may need to chop and change again, and again and again and again and again. You can go on for a long time. Yeah. My key thing that I always say to people is we all wake up in a different mood. Sure. You feel a different way every day and throughout the day. Right. And so you don't feel like doing the same thing every day. And if you did, you'd probably be bored.
Yeah, that would be boring.
Yeah, there are people that can do that. Yeah. So there are people that can actually like routine and crave a routine. They know at 8 o'clock they get up, they get out of bed, they go to the bathroom, they sit down, they have something to eat, they listen to the radio, and every day they do the same thing. They're creatures of habit, and that's fine too. Right. They can find their own way of learning a language. But for people that have a wider spectrum of emotions during the day, because chemically we're very different, and we all have little nuances within the way we think and the way we feel and the way we learn and the way we react to things and respond to people and things around us. And that is the key thing, that being presented with more and more perspectives and more ways of learning and doing things and being exposed to language for the purpose of improving our own language skills is really important, because then we can recognize, okay, when I wake up and I feel terrible, what can I do? Will a song pick me up? Will I be able to listen to something? Will I be able to do something like that to just get me in the mood a little bit more? Right. Will reading a children's story help? Will reading an adult story help? Will watching a sci-fi episode, of your favourite show, like Star Trek or something, in a different language or with subtitles in a different language or a mixture of whatever, will that help to get you going? Right. Is that what you need on that day? Or can you sit down at the table and go through a course or go through a grammar book or go through a dictionary, as some people do? What suits you? And I think that's where the amount of information has increased to show these different methods in a more accessible way. Right. Because not everyone goes to university or goes to a place where you can really research this in detail. Right. Some people, and a lot of people, want shortcuts. Of course, yeah. A lot of people want shortcuts.
A magic pill.
Yeah, and the actual truth is there is no shortcut. Language learning is language learning is language learning. You need to do it. It takes time. It's a type of overlearning. You need to know it. It needs to go into your head. Yeah. It's not like You know, it's not like some other knowledge. Let's say history, you maybe need to remember some key dates and kind of what happened, but you can paraphrase to get your point across.
Right.
Okay, you can't make up new facts, but you can paraphrase using different words. You don't need to know it off by heart. But language is slightly different to that because you do need to know.
Right.
You can't just fudge a word that easily.
Right.
You can talk around the word, but you still need other words to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So
it does make it quite hard.
It's memorizing. There is a type of rote memorization, whether it's an easy rote memorization because you find it easy to do and it's quick to do on some words or some aspects of grammar, or sometimes it's harder because the sounds might be strange to you. Or same as kids have the same problem when they're growing up. You tell a child a very strange word in a language, and they're going to go, huh? And they may need to hear you repeat it several times. Yeah. Another word, it may just click, and they know it, they remember it.
Is it association or
some sort of association? How we all remember, I think, is quite different. We all think in different ways.
It's almost impossible to figure out how memory works.
Yeah, I mean, again, everyone's different.
Right,
our brains work in different ways, and we've heard some people talk about synesthesia here.
Yeah,
attaching colours or feelings to letters and words.
It's really strange.
And
at least I find I don't have it. So.
If you don't have it, it sounds really unusual.
Right.
But it's like many things that are different. It will have its advantages and its disadvantages.
Sure.
And you hear people talk about those when they speak about the phenomena.
Yeah. It's almost like the savants. There was the documentaries about. Was he from England? I think?
Daniel Tammet.
Yeah. He was when he was asked to do a math problem, he said that he just saw kind of a landscape.
Yeah.
And the numbers kind of just transformed into colours and shapes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess that's the same with the well, it's a lower form, I suppose, or higher form of synesthesia, however you want to put it. But it is a big and unknown territory.
I actually, it's funny that you brought him up because I met his Icelandic teacher.
Oh, really?
In Reykjavik last year, and I spoke to her about him, and
was he as incredible?
She said he was absolutely amazing.
Right.
And she said the footage that we saw. Said that he'd been there for a week. In actual fact, he was only there for like 3 or 4 days.
God.
Where he actually had time to study language. So he did very, very well. And she said he was that good.
Right.
She said it was incredible. And I actually made a video with her in Icelandic.
Right.
I just haven't released it yet.
Oh, God. Well, I don't speak any Icelandic, sadly.
I have to put subtitles on, which I haven't done.
Yeah,
so the listeners can hear me murder Icelandic. I'll so any Icelanders out there that ever listen to this when I get around to putting it online, do forgive me.
Right. And one last question I want to ask you about general language learning is, and again, looking back at when you kind of started out, I know it's a longer process than that, but what kind of things are you doing very differently now than from when you started? Because I think you've put every single video you could ever make on how you actually learn it. But what do you think you do differently now than you didn't when you started, or did you do new things maybe that you didn't do back then?
Back in the day.
Yeah, back in the heyday.
No.
It's about the
same. About the same. I mean, I've always mixed materials because again, I don't always feel like doing the same thing. I get bored of the same thing. I guess I go with my concentration. So if I don't feel I can concentrate on a specific day, then I'll mix it up a little bit so that it makes it more interesting for me. But no, I mean, really, the tools I'm using are fairly similar. I will use new technology more. So, for example, my iPad or whatever I will use. If there's a new application, I'll try it out and play with it. And maybe that kind of thing, I suppose, has changed because that's because technology's changed.
Yeah.
But the fundamental process of what I'm going through is similar because even though it's an application on an iPad, it's still a type of course, or it's still a type of video, or it's still the same kinds of materials I was using before.
Right. It's just in a different
format. Exactly.
Some people say, and I read a study about this, that when you use your hand to take notes, they did a university class. When they did notes by hand and compared to people who did notes on the computer, they said that the people who did notes by hand could recall a fairly significantly higher percentage of the learning. Do you think that technology is there's a risk that by making it too easy for us to consume language content that it's gonna be less efficient? I mean, is too efficient less efficient in the end? Because I hear about, Nils Iversen or somebody like David James. They all write by hand.
So do I.
Tons of hand.
So do I.
Right.
I've got books and books and books and books and books and books that I've written. This year I took on Ladino, and my idea was to do it for 3 months, but I finished a course that I had in a month.
Wow.
And then I went to Istanbul and I listened to talks in Ladino, and I found I could understand pretty much everything that they said. The only thing I couldn't follow very well was the comedy routine they had at the end, because they mixed in a lot of street Turkish that I wasn't familiar with, and they went between the two, like he code switched a lot.
Oh, really?
The guy, and I couldn't get all of the references. It was too difficult to get all the references.
Right.
That would need to be a really high level.
Of course, I think that's true for most languages. The jokes are hard,
but the songs and the presentations, I listened there for about 2 hours, and I followed everything, and I could laugh at the right places when they made jokes, and it wasn't too hard, because it's quite similar to Spanish, and it's got the same kind of Turkish words that I'm used to in Macedonian, and it's got these words that I know anyway.
Right.
I mean, bearing in mind this is a language that was spoken on the Balkans.
Right.
After they left Spain, a lot of them went to the Balkans to live in the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans accepted the Jewish people into the Ottoman Empire, and they lived there. And a lot of them then, as things changed, they went to Istanbul, which is where the main Sephardi community is outside of Israel.
Right.
And where the language is probably, I imagine, most spoken. I'd be corrected if I'm wrong.
Sure.
But after a month, I'd been through the course, because it was so similar to what I'd seen before.
Right.
And I wrote out the whole book, all the dialogues. I don't tend to write in English. I write it all. I just write the language that's there.
Yeah.
And if there's a word I don't know, I may write a note above it. Okay, this means this.
Right.
So that I don't forget what it is.
Right.
And then I just read through my notes and go through again. And then really with a language like that, you need to get into the music, into the literature, and things like that. I didn't feel I needed to take it much further. I'm one that learns languages for more practical reasons. Right. I'm interested. I want to learn how it works and how it goes, and be able to communicate for certain languages. Right. But I don't particularly need to get into. I'm not going to start going around talking about Ladino, even though I definitely encourage anyone out there to have a look at it. I think it's well worth a visit. But at the same time, to get to that very high level, I think you need a real reason to do that, some motivation.
So you think the first step is it's not for you a particularly hard or time-consuming task, but if you had to go from that to understanding all the jokes and the internal humor, maybe even cultural humor, that would be a considerable effort.
It's a huge investment for any language, even a language that's similar to ones you speak. It's a bigger investment than getting to that nice stage where you can communicate.
Right.
And understand things without having to strain and to struggle.
Right.
I mean, once you get to that stage in any language, I think you feel these endorphins always running through your body of, wow, the satisfaction of learning, and wow, I've actually got to this level, I've turned that corner. But to get to the other corners in a language where you turn the corner to the advanced level and then you turn another corner much, much later, I mean, we're talking years, where you get to kind of a near native level. Right. That corner, to turn that corner, it's almost a lifetime investment.
That's a long time. So no, you're not going to get to the C2+ in Ladino, but
no, I don't. I know, and I don't see the need. I mean, I don't have a work need for it. I don't have a social need for it, because no one speaks Ladino where I live. Right. I try to be practical about what I'm doing. It makes sense. Even if I did, how would I maintain it? It would be, you know what I mean? It does, that need to then study it for so long, so many hours, doesn't then go away just because you've got to that level. You don't stay at that level unless you continue.
Yeah. So I guess rounding off the whole writing by hand, I guess my concern is that I'm a young generation that's grown up with computers. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, computers, I'm sure, can be efficient in producing or improving language learning. But I actually think the more I think about it, that going back to kind of writing by hand, because then you activate two different parts of the brain and all this, I think it's actually something that I will consider when I come back. And
it's well worth doing. What I find I like to do is sometimes if I'm looking at a new text that I find difficult to understand, I like to read it first, and then I will look at the words I don't know. I'll look what their meanings are, and then I'll go back and reread it. And then I'll start writing it out.
Right, just word for word?
Yeah, and then I will read what I've written.
Right.
And I will read it out as I'm writing it as well.
So that's all the processes?
Yeah, that's basically what I do when I'm writing something out. And I find that just having that repetition in what I'm doing is pretty handy for me. As I say, it doesn't work for everyone.
Right, of course.
These are all things that work for me. There's no real right or wrong in this.
That's a good thing.
There's a what works and what doesn't work for me.
Right. Fantastic. Well, Richard, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. It's been an honor and a great pleasure to have you. And
thank you.
You know, you were among my biggest inspirators for starting this in the first place. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Wow.
Listening to the Actual Fluency Podcast. For more information, be sure to check out actualfluency.com. Until next time, enjoy learning and have a great day.